Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am so looking forward to this conversation with Kristin Urbanus today. Kristin, thank you so much for joining me. We've been chatting for a few minutes before hitting record, and I just know there's going to be so much we could talk about. We could probably be here for the next 5 hours and not run out of things that we have in alignment. So please welcome to the show and introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and how you show up in the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Dory. And yeah, who am I? What a question. Well, I'll just begin by saying I'm a spiritual psychology and somatic touch practitioner, a certified life coach. I have also been teaching yoga and meditation for many years, and I feel like I just described myself professionally, but really it's a life path. And I feel like my life path has really set me up to do this work professionally and to assist others professionally, but also on a personal level. I mean, if I look back from the time I was very, very young, kind of had the sensitivity, and I was always really interested in, as a kid, age-appropriate psychology things, but then of course studied psychology. And I feel like there's an integration of this work as a life path, personally, socially, in my relationships, professionally. And then of course, like looking at what's happening collectively, where there's this huge, exciting movement of more and more of this type of work becoming mainstream, and more people being just open to the deeper dive of self-exploration.
Yeah, I love that.
Go ahead.
And you started to say looking at.
I mean, looking at patterns in our collective consciousness, in our individual consciousness, and looking at, I think when we do increase our awareness and start to take, like a magnifying glass, which we've done collectively, we've been forced to do collectively, right? But when we look at the patterns and, what's happening for ourselves individually, but also what's happening collectively, I think we're being forced to make changes. And those changes can feel uncomfortable. I guess right now I'm speaking collectively, but it's individual as well, right? That can feel really, really uncomfortable, but it's also, then we get to become more aware and conscious and intentional about, well, what, as you often say, like, what do we want to create? What are our intentions? What are we moving towards? And
Oh, it's there's so much in there I could delve into. And I want to ask a logistic question before we delve into some of the more esoteric, fun stuff that I like to get into the juiciness around. But in case people aren't aware, what is a somatic touch practitioner? I love how you name that as part of your introduction. And you're so right that for so many of the heart-centered entrepreneurs that I work with, our professional identity is a result of our individual journeys. So it is one of the same. But I think it's such a powerful mechanism for healing that many people may not be aware of. Could you talk a little bit about what a somatic touch practitioner is and does, and the benefits? And then we can get into some more of your journey and, some of the deeper, exciting topics that I know you and I we could go off on. Any which one of them.
Yeah. So in brief, a somatic touch practitioner. So somatic touch is a hands-on modality that works directly with the central nervous system to encourage regulation in the central nervous system. So it works with the kidney, adrenals, the brainstem, and really it's assisting the body, so the physical level, and the nervous system to, we talk about patterns, right? So offer a new pattern or new neural pathways of regulation. So instead of, say, the body, if it's stuck in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, well, with the somatic touch is co-regulation. It's offering co-regulation. So it's offering the body and the nervous system a new pathway of regulation, rest and digest.
It's so powerful. I think people don't realize just how central the central nervous system is to every single thing that we are reacting with.
Yes.
And that the key isn't to solve the problem necessarily. The key is to regulate your nervous system. Because once the nervous system is regulated, you have greater ability and access to respond, not react. Like, bottom line, it's that simple. It's not that easy, but it's just that simple.
Yes. 100%.
And so for you to assist people in that, in additional modalities, I imagine it makes it easier for them to access other tools once they've gotten assistance through that somatic touch.
100%. I think, it's like what becomes available to us when we have what other choices that maybe it's like we're multidimensional in consciousness. So of course, we have our intellect, and a lot of times people will be working on the level of the mind, like working to shift perspectives or shifting thought patterns, things like that. But we also have, as you shared, our nervous system, our physical body, our emotional body, our energetic body. And so if we have a pattern that's really deeply woven into our nervous system, but we're only working on the level of like the mind or the emotional body, it's going to be really hard to shift if we're not also creating space for the nervous system regulation and working with the body as well. So yeah, I find that with greater nervous system regulation, which is good for everyone, just more space becomes available to make different choices.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things I know that you do in your work, and I've been recently really fascinated by, is transgenerational trauma. And looking at the research of how much we physically embody patterns from previous generations. And so this somatic work, I think, is, again, more important than people recognize, because we are born into the world carrying traumas and burdens and emotions and conflicts that we weren't consciously there for, but we are a part of a lineage that carries that. And so sometimes, if you, like you're saying, if we're talking at the mind level, the cognitive level, the emotional level, and we're still feeling stuck, there might be more underneath that is just physically embodied that needs to be moved. I find the whole thing fascinating.
It's true, because you're right. Like, we have patterns that are operating in our consciousness on all levels, on our physical level, the nervous system, the emotional body, the mental, energetic, etc. And part of the process, I think, of self-awareness and personal growth work is just becoming aware that they're there, that they're operating in our lives. And then, of course, what do we do with that? How do we work with that?
That's the big question is, well, that's great, but what do I do with it?
Right.
So what was your own personal journey for what you would like to share that led you towards spiritual psychology and somatic work? And obviously somatics, I think, is so closely linked to yoga and meditation, because we're getting into the body for that purpose of regulation and healing. So what has been your journey that has led to this beautiful kind of cohesion of different modalities and work that you do personally and professionally?
Yeah. Well, so right now I'm working in utero, in my own process. And so I really believe, again, that my life path has completely set me up for this work, this journey. I was always interested in psychology and personal growth and that type of a thing, and study that in college. And I think on a more, we hear about people having kind of big life events that it's not always that way, but that can catapult them onto the journey of spiritual growth or whatever that looks like for them. And for me, that's how it was. I was always interested in psychology, but I was living in Spain. I had a boyfriend at the time who was a Spaniard, and he passed away suddenly and unexpectedly.
My goodness.
Yeah, and it was so jolting. And I experienced that. I was pretty young. I was 23, and I didn't have any tools. I didn't grow up, this generation is growing up with more acceptance, awareness around meditation, sure, yoga, etc. So I didn't have any tools, and I experienced that life event as very traumatic and traumatizing.
Wow.
And yeah, the best word to describe it is catapulted me onto this conscious path of growth. But it took a lot of healing and rewiring to learn what I am experiencing and have experienced as the most powerful modalities on the planet. Obviously that's a bias, but what happened was I was trying all the regular quote unquote modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy, even yoga and meditation, and nothing was working.
And you were still feeling really stuck.
Absolutely.
Stuck in that trauma, stuck in grief, yes. I imagine.
Yes. And it was only through, and here we come back to like, we're multidimensional in consciousness. So if if there's something that you're working it on the mental level or the emotional level, but it's actually a pattern that's rooted in the nervous system, or there's something much, much deeper, in the unconscious, but you're just working at the very tip top level, like you can only get so far. And so that's what I was finding is I was going to experts, I was going to doctors. I mean, I did this for years and nothing worked.
Wow.
Until, everything worked a little bit, but until I found the somatic work, somatic touch, spiritual psychology, I feel have been the most powerful tools work. And I also find that for clients, like working with people and I'm going to pause to think about how to say this. I think one of the most powerful tools or processes that I work with people in spiritual psychology, and it's not necessarily unique. It's more of the internal family systems, is the parts work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so funny. And of course, not at all coincidental that you're saying that, because IFS, and for those who don't know much about IFS, internal family system, we have these parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not super versed in it, but it's been something that has been a lot more of the conversation in my realm these days. And when we have these different parts that are either acting out or unhealed or are a messenger for something, we can have conversations with these different pieces of ourselves, and it's not our full identity. Right. So yeah. I interrupted just to kind of jump in with that. Of course, we're talking about IFS because that's what's been on my mind for a while lately. So say more about that.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think again, for listeners, and maybe I'll bring it back to like intention. We can all relate to that, right? So if we set an intention, and a lot of times when I'm starting to work with people, we clarify what's your intention, and specifically the intention behind the intention. So I often ask people to begin, if you could have one thing change that would create the greatest overall impact in your life, what would that be? And that might be like something external, a relationship, a career change, et cetera. Or oftentimes it's really people are seeking something internal that's a different experience. And then, we all have a place of wisdom inside. So that's a piece of the parts work, right? We have a higher wisdom or higher level of consciousness that we all have access to inside that is characterized by stillness, by calm. Like I call this your inner guide. But it's that place inside where if we were to have to make a really big decision about something, where do we go internally to find that place of knowing?
And we've got some other parts that are not such great guide.
Other parts. And so then also, like, when we set an intention, say I set an intention to be in a relationship or to have this inner sense of calm or whatever, what are all the aspects in my consciousness that are between me and my intention? So yeah, that gets into the other parts, like procrastination, doubt, worry, anxiety, and allowing each part to have space at the table to express itself so that it's seen and heard. Allowing each part to have an expression can be really healing and create lots of integration.
Yeah, that integration of those parts is really powerful. I was once at here in the Bay Area. There's Spirit Rock, which is Jack Cornfield's meditation center, and I was there for a day-long meditation, and it was all on IFS, and it was so powerful being guided in a meditation in which the part of ourselves that needed the most healing, and I imagined this part of me up on a stage, and all the other parts of me were down below, like in the audience, and they were asking me, what was that part of me needing?
Yeah.
I was needing maybe acknowledgement or acceptance or compassion. And, whatever was making that part of me that was up on the stage that was most unhealed, if there was any sort of rebellion or acting out behavior or, kind of how we sometimes, when we feel stuck, we don't know what to do. It's really an expression of a need that's not being met.
Yeah.
And when we can get stuck in a very negative spiral and look at that as shame or guilt or not worthy or insecurity or anxiety or fear or doubt, right? But when you can ask yourself, well, what is that part needing?
Yes.
It shifts the conversation. It shifts the lens of like, oh, that's not a quote, bad part of me. That's just a part that's needing something that's not getting expressed or not having room to be heard. So in this meditation, that part of me was up on the stage. My other parts were asking these very supportive questions. And then at the end, I came down off the stage and I was embraced by all these other parts. And I remember just crying at the meditation. And we went on to something else. And I just sat journaling my experience so I could remember. And I have it still like in my nightstand drawer. And I've referred back to talk about integration of ourselves.
Yeah.
When we don't shame one part of us or give too much power to one part of us or let a part be our guide who maybe is not the most wise or maybe a trauma informed part of us that is, or a younger 5-year-old self who's acting out and throwing a temper tantrum because they're not being heard, or a rebellious 15-year-old self. Like, when we recognize we are an integrated piece of these selves, that sometimes that different part of us is trying to be heard. Fascinating integration work.
Fascinating. And I love that you shared that example, because it's so true. When we, Mary Hulnick, who's a teacher at the University of Santa Monica, says all parts have purpose. So I think we can have, and Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor, the author of A Man's Search for Meaning, says between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our freedom to choose a new response. And I feel like a lot of this work lives in the space between between stimulus and response, where we're in this space and we're repatterning, we're rewiring. And I love what you shared about asking that part, what do you need? And I feel like when we're able to see the part, it's not all of us, it's a part of us. And all parts have purpose. So what is, a lot of times, I just had a client the other day ask me, okay, I'm in the space between stimulus and response. I'm there. I've paused. I'm observing from a neutral place my reaction to my child, but I'm triggered. What do I do? And so part of that work is obviously to work with the trigger, right? But also, here's a tool.
Yeah.
One of the tools we worked with is
Yep. Let my dog out.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, is, well, first of all, what if that part is scared, or if that part is protecting you? It's like when we start to realize, like, what is the purpose here? If it has purpose, instead of shaming it or rejecting it, what does it have to show me, or what does it want, or what does it need? And then we become curious. And so we take the shift away from the judgment, which a lot of us, there's just a lot of judgment in our culture in general, to a lens of curiosity. And then we have compassion. We're able to have more understanding, compassion in space.
Yep.
And then I also love the kind of, if I were to be more accepting of this reaction, then like, how would I feel about the situation now?
Yeah. It's so much easier said than done. And for those listening who are like, yeah, I want to be able to do that, but that seems like a lot to do in the moment when your kid is triggering you and you're reacting and you're yelling, and it's also possible. I always say it's like building a muscle, right? So it might seem really hard at first, just like, picking up a 25-pound weight might feel really hard at first, but if you practice over time, eventually you're going to be able to do that. And, all those key words you just said, of start with the awareness and then get curious and then have compassion, and, just taking it step by step, it's actually not that hard if we can recognize this is actually going to get us to where we want to be. Because the reaction and the trigger and reacting to that trigger is never going to get us to where we want to be.
Yeah.
Like, people always will say to me in a similar kind of scenario, but Jory, I don't have the time to go through all those steps. Like, that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Well, you also don't have the time to stay angry and triggered, but you didn't sign up for that, but it's already here. So you're already extending time and energy, effort, and attention to the thing you don't want, that you didn't actually say you had time for. You didn't say you had time to get triggered today, but you're surely giving a lot of time and space to it. So what if you took that same time and space and just did it intentionally with things that are going to get you to where you want to be? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's the movement that's happening on the planet right now, and we saw such a big shift with COVID of people starting to really acknowledge. I mean, in California, obviously it's different, and I'm based in the Midwest most of the time. And so there's been this huge shift of normalizing, and also this, people are so hungry and thirsty for these consciousness shifting practices, meditation, mindfulness, therapy, coaching. I mean, there's this collective hunger and thirst for how do I do that? How do I shift my patterns and my reactions? And there's this really powerful skill. I assist the advanced spiritual psychology programs at the University of Santa Monica. I'm so lucky to have found that modality in school, and it's so powerful. It's called the basic skill of neutral observation.
I love it already.
I know. And so you identify a situation that was challenging, or say there was a charge, and you share about that and your experience of that. And then you move into the space of the neutral observer. So into that space characterized by stillness and calm, where there's not the judgment, where there's acceptance, more objective, more of kind of the meta view. And you replay from that perspective. What what happened now? And a lot of times I find that people say, it takes away the judgment. Again, it's like, oh, I see a guy who was like really tired from a long week at work and just really wanted to connect with his wife, but felt insecure or burnt out or whatever. And so people start to go, oh, I saw a woman who was terrified of the email from, whatever. And so it starts to create more compassion as opposed to the judgment that we layer on top so easily of ourselves and of others. Yeah.
Again, it sounds so difficult to access, but it's simply building a muscle to get there. And to hold the intention, I have an intention to be a neutral observer, right?
Yeah.
Almost every morning on my Instagram account, I post a photo of me meditating with some sort of meditation prompt. And usually you can find my dog Buddha at my feet because as evidence that I just had to let him out of my room, he's often right by my side. But the one that I did for this morning was, breathe in an intention that you want to set for the day and like put it on a post-it, like let it be somewhere you can see it, because we set these intentions and then we forget. And then we go back to like our everyday behaviors and patterns and wonder like, why is nothing changing?
Yeah.
It's because it takes time, energy, effort, attention, and sustained intention. Be like, oh, right, I was going to be the observer. Okay, let me try that again.
Yeah.
And I invite people too, because I do a very similar thing in my work, to like, you can restart a conversation, you can restart a reaction. I've done a lot of mindful parenting work over the years, and my kids are now 16 and 19. And early on in my motherhood journey, I found mindfulness and it really shifted how I parented. And, I would start to raise my voice and I would catch myself like, oh, wait, I don't have to finish this sentence. I remember the example I give a lot is there was one time my kids wouldn't get in the bath, and it was like 8 o'clock. My ex-husband was still at work. So, mama was tired and I was kind of done for the day. Mama was ready to clock out. Like no one was listening.
Yeah.
And not being heard is a trigger of mine. And so like them not getting in the bath was a deeper trigger that isn't just them, right? It's other areas that trigger that part of me that feels unheard. And I started to raise my voice to get them in the bath. And I had this moment of awareness of like, like I said, I don't have to finish this sentence. And I caught myself and I said, you know what, you guys, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, because we also know that in our brain, if we name what's arising, it quiets the amygdala, that emotional alarm. So just naming it actually diffuses our reaction to it. Literally neuroscience. It seems so simple, but it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So I just said, you know what, you guys, I'm getting really, really overwhelmed. So I named it. That helped regulate my nervous system. It helped start to regulate theirs, because they could, by proxy, be able to pick up on my energy.
Yep.
And I said, I'm just going to take a minute, and I just need to take a few breaths. And I literally stopped, as they're like being like little wild banshees, right? I literally stopped. But I took just like 2 really slow breaths.
Wow. And
I said, okay, you guys, what do we need to do to get into the bath? And guess what? They got in the bath. But like, I give this example because I think it highlights so much of what you just named of, we set an intention, we can have some sort of challenging conversation, we can choose to see it again through a different lens.
Yeah.
And then we can enact it through that lens. And then it moves the needle.
Yeah.
For not just you, for other people. And then I can come back to that and say, like, I now have a working model to know that when I do that, it works, or I feel better, or I diffused more anger, or I didn't get as reactive. But we can catch ourselves in the moment.
Well, I acknowledge you. That's really powerful what you just shared, because you had the awareness to pause. You created that pause between stimulus and response.
Yeah.
you did it verbally and you took deep breaths, you were doing it physiologically, you were naming it. Your kids, it was courageous and vulnerable to say like, I'm triggered, right?
Yeah.
That's a
And
vulnerable.
I don't want to say something I don't mean. That's not going to make me feel good. That's not going to make you feel good. Like, this benefits everyone for me to pause right now.
Yeah. And then you involved your kids in, what do we need to do to get into the bath? But then they're learning from you.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
And
I think
thank you for saying that, Kristin. Yeah. I share that. Go ahead.
I think we underestimate the power of what you just described, like that. It seems small, but that's actually huge.
And that's why I share that example often, because it is the smallest little thing. It was just my kids getting in the bath. But, so many parents wonder, like, why is nighttime so chaotic? What can I do? Well, it starts with you. Like, you're exhausted. Like, when I was married, my ex-husband worked a lot. So I felt like I was a single mom a lot of the time. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And, our triggers are real. And then yet we don't recognize our own power and ability to either contribute to the chaos or to turn the volume down on it. Because we think, oh, if the kids were better behaved, I wouldn't be so triggered and the night would be easier. Well, yes. And what is the role model of the energy you're putting out? And it's like that for everyone, not just kids, partners, coworkers, our inner parts with ourselves.
Well, and it brings me to two things. And one is that the power of acknowledging ourselves. And that's another basic skill. I'm plugging the University of Santa Monica, it's prizing, it's acknowledging. I mean, just so often we just rush through our accomplishments, and even accomplishments being like inner changes and inner shifts. If we were to, there's that quote that says, and I'm not going to get it completely right, but something to the degree of like, how we've worked so hard, we're living right now the things that we've prayed for and worked so hard for. And then when we get here, can we celebrate, are we just on to the next thing, or can we really celebrate like, wow, I just had a magical moment with my kids or with my friends, or I just stayed in that moment of stillness and calm and centeredness for half of the day. Whereas a year ago, I wasn't able to get there, only once a week. I think that brings something really important about celebrating ourselves and acknowledging like everybody's doing the very best that they can, including ourselves. And if we were to focus, this is a bit more positive psychology, I guess, but I actually think there's something so genuine in just acknowledging our own gifts and our own, intention, because I believe that really at the end of the day, everybody wants to do well by themselves. And it's the judgment, the ways that we judge ourselves, which really just takes our energy away, from ourselves, from ourselves and from others.
I mean, isn't it? It's so true. We all just want to feel good.
Yeah.
It's okay if we don't feel great all the time. That would be, bonus. But with our inner critic, with those judgments, we don't feel good a lot of the time with our reactions, with our traumas. So all these tools, we just feel good. It's like, it seems, I don't want to distill it down to something so simplistic, but this is, I think, why you and I are so passionate about doing this work, right? If I could speak for you, I know, I see it on your face, and, we do this work because we're passionate, knowing that this can help you feel good.
Yeah.
More of the time than feeling bad when we feel really stuck in reactivity or trauma or a dysregulated nervous system or fears or anxieties or hurt or pain. Life is fucking hard. We need all the tools we can to feel good more of the time.
Yeah. And I think acknowledging, so before I was talking about like a context, I think when people have a context for why am I having the experiences that I'm
Mm.
having? Why do I have, what are my triggers, or what, right? Like, why do I continue to have the experience that I have? And part of it is that it's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
We have patterns that we're here to learn and grow through. We have heartfelt desires that we're here to manifest and live into. And we have unique gifts and talents that we're here to express and offer and to be of service. And I think it's both, and it's like identifying an intention, and then it's cultivating those. It's the small things we do every day that make a big difference over time. So that moment of pause, like, that's huge. I feel like we should, I taught really young children for a long time, and there's this willingness to be, for me, unconditional towards like really little ones, and be so celebratory of their successes. And I think that there's space for us to be celebratory with ourselves. Yeah. And what are those small incremental steps that we could do every day that will make a big difference over time, right?
Yeah.
Things that are meant to stretch us in the direction of our intention, but also build our confidence.
Yeah.
And then also the shadow work, or the, people call it shadow work.
Yeah.
I call it, working with the human experience, but what we're here to learn and grow through. And how can we, I think just one of the biggest things is understanding that all of it is a normal, natural part of the human experience.
Gosh,
And
wouldn't that feel like freedom if we knew like nothing was wrong with us?
yes, there's nothing for all listeners. You didn't do anything wrong. This is what Ron Holnick always says. You didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with you.
It's so powerful. It's hard to believe at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to, put it back into what you were saying in the context of our experience,
Mm-hmm.
and to take that, neutral step back observer view, we can not feel so isolated in the definition of ourselves or our lives based on just a moment, but look at that bigger picture, whether it's our whole life or just human consciousness collectively, right?
Yeah, which we're going through a huge transformation collectively in the human consciousness. And that is not to be it's a big deal. Like, what we're going through collectively right now is a really big deal, and people are feeling it collectively, and they're feeling it on the individual level, and just kind of like on a high level note. And I'm interested to see what you've seen shifting in the field of not just therapy, but just the general field of psychology and personal development.
Yeah, I said at the beginning of COVID, whatever was under a flashlight of awareness is now under a floodlight of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
That COVID stripped away our ability to hide anything from our
Mm-hmm.
own self, because we could no longer distract ourselves into not paying attention to what was arising within us and around us.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have seen some conflict internally with people who had greater awareness from that great pause of COVID, right? And yet not have the ability or tools to put into practice the shifts they want to make as a result, but yet life keeps throwing curveballs.
Yeah.
And I'm just a believer that this is okay, remember you wanted this to change for another opportunity. And then we're like, shit, there's this other trigger again. But no, really, it's another opportunity, right?
Yeah.
That we can see. And I think people are feeling exhausted from the curveballs.
Yeah.
But the collective consciousness is this desire for shift, this desire for growth, this desire for change. And we're seeing it in Mother Nature. We're seeing it, in our health. We're seeing it in our sleep pattern. We're seeing, interruptions everywhere. And if we look at it through that lens of frustration, anger, annoyance, disruption, we're going to end up feeling anger, irritated, annoyed, disrupted, and we're going to over personalize it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the collective consciousness part of it is, okay, no, wait, this is like an opportunity here. This is a wake-up call. This is a gift to say, you think you want to go back to the way it was pre-2020, but guess what? A lot of that wasn't so good. And now the universe is saying, okay, now you got to do a little bit different. Yay. Awesome. So let's do it. I mean, my client load doubled during COVID, and fear and anxiety, I mean, we know that the statistical rate for anxiety and depression almost went up fourfold, from a statistic between like 11-ish% at any given time up to like 40%. And yes, that might be situational, but it also was a trauma. So it might stick around a little bit longer because we also went through a collective trauma. And I define trauma very loosely around a dysregulation of the nervous system, right? Yeah. When we don't feel within control, it can be a lowercase t trauma. It doesn't have to be life or death for it to be a trauma, but we also know that enough lowercase t traumas accumulate in the brain to have the same response as a capital T trauma. So we've had a lot of lowercase t traumas collectively. Yeah. And so, we are ripe for this new higher awareness and consciousness and shift to say, okay, universe, I'm listening. It's time to set some new intentions, but like now I really need this support to stick to those intentions, because I know I can't go back, because what would it go back to? And I don't yet know how to embody it in a new way. Kristin, I told you and I could talk for hours. These kind of conversations, they light me up, because I feel like the more people out here doing this light work. Yes. Really.
I love that you refer to it. That's how I refer to it.
Yeah, it is. I recently just got a new tattoo. I was in Israel back in October when my daughter was studying abroad. And I'm for those who can't see, obviously I'm only on audio, but I'm showing Kristin my tattoo, and it's the Hebrew word for light. And it's been a theme in my life. And so, light, it's not just an embodiment of how we can live our lives, but how we shine that on others in the work that we get to do. And that's so much of what you're doing. So thank you for the way you're showing up in the world and the work. How can people find you if they want to learn more or work with you?
Well, I love what you shared about light work. And on a scientific level, emotions have frequency, right? So this is actually science. Emotions have frequency that can be measured in hertz. David Hawkins shows this and describes this in his map of consciousness. And so healing is the application of loving to the places inside that hurt. So when we take a higher frequency and there's no judgment, but there are higher and lower frequencies, right? When our bodies feel more open and comfortable and expanded in, say, acceptance, joy, willingness, neutrality, love, and the more contracted states, anger, grief, fear, etc. Healing is the application of loving to the places inside that hurt. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing, right? When we create a safe container for people to show up and hold in a neutral, loving, pleasant presence, and then place a loving or neutral frequency vibration to a place that hurts. That can create just incredible transformation, along with
I love that visual.
Tools. Yeah. To me, that's a definition of quote unquote light work.
I love that.
Yeah. So speaking of how can you find me? Well, you can go to my website, KristinUrbanus.com, Kristin with a K and with an I, Urbanus.com.
And the link will be in the show notes so people can easily get to that.
Yep. And you can follow me on Instagram at Life Coach Yoga. And speaking of support, so you're talking about how people are, exhausted from all the things. I am going to be offering a self-love group. So it's a group really, I'm pausing because the container is just amazing. A container for people to embody more self-love and included in that presence, ability to be with themselves.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so that will be we're starting in March.
Wonderful.
If you're interested. Yeah.
Well, Kristin, I really thank you for your time today. I loved connecting with you. Your links will be in the show notes, and I really hope that you and I can continue our own conversations offline together, because it's really wonderful to connect. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope all of you listening really got some great wisdom you can take away with you, and I wish you to all take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.